you ever caught yourself thinking, look, I know what I should be doing, just not doing it? Welcome to episode 3 of the Mindshift Method podcast. My name's Rob Edmonds, creator of the Mindshift Method and cognitive pattern reprogramming. Now, in this episode, we're going to break down why you feel stuck, even when you know exactly what to do. Because this is one of the most frustrating experiences that people have, feeling like they know, but still not moving. Have you ever caught yourself thinking, look, I know what I should be doing, just not doing it? It's not a lack of motivation. It's not a lack of information. It's not like you haven't read the books or listened to the podcasts or had the conversations or listened to your coach. You know what needs to change. You know what would move things forward. You know what would make a difference. Yet, there's this gap, this space between knowing and doing. And that gap is where frustration lives. Because on one side of that gap is the version of you that can see clearly. The version of you that thinks, I've got this. Understand it now. This time it's going to be different. On the other side is the version of you that hesitates, that delays, that puts it off, that somehow ends up back in the same place. What makes this so frustrating is that you're aware of both. You can see the potential. You can see yourself not stepping into it. And that creates a very specific kind of tension, because it's not confusion, it's not lack of clarity, it's something else entirely. It's like having one foot on the accelerator and the other foot on the brake. No matter how hard you try to push forward, something just keeps holding you back. And over time, that starts to wear on you because you begin to question yourself. You start asking, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just do this? Why do I keep getting in my own way? This is where most people make a critical mistake. They assume the problem is them. They assume it's a personality flaw, or a lack of discipline, or a lack of motivation, or even worse, they start to believe this is just who I am. Once that belief starts to settle in, it changes everything. Because now it's no longer just about behavior. It becomes about identity. It becomes, I'm the kind of person who doesn't follow through. I'm the kind of person who starts and stops. I'm the kind of person who can't seem to change. When that identity forms, every new attempt carries the weight of the past. You're not starting fresh. You're starting from a place of doubt, from a place of hesitation, from a place where part of you already expects it's not going to work and it's not going to last. And that expectation quietly shapes your behavior. You might still start, you might still try, but there's something underneath it all that isn't fully on board. And that's why the cycle repeats. You get motivated, you take action, you feel good, and then something shifts. Not dramatically, not all at once, but subtly. You start to slow down. You start to question. You start to feel that familiar resistance creeping back in. Before you know it, you've stepped away again. And you're left sitting there thinking, how'd I end up back here again? And most people at this point double down on effort. They think, I just need to try harder. I need more discipline. I just need to push through this. And for a short period of time, that can work. Because effort can override patterns temporarily, but doesn't change them. And that's the key. Because eventually, when the effort drops, when life gets busy, when things feel uncertain, the pattern comes back. When it does, it doesn't ask for permission. It just runs. And suddenly you're back in that same loop. Again. And this is where people start to lose trust in themselves. Not because they're incapable, but because they don't understand what's actually happening. They think they're making conscious decisions. They're not. Because in reality, a lot of what's happening is being driven underneath awareness. And until that becomes clear, it feels like you're fighting yourself. Like part of you wants one thing and another part of you wants something else. No matter what you do, you can't seem to get those two parts aligned. And what if this isn't a motivation problem? What if this isn't a discipline problem? What if there's nothing wrong with your ability to change? What if the real issue is that something else is running the show? Something automatic. Something that you learned to do. Something that's been reinforced time over time without you even realizing it. Because here's the truth. This is the point where things start to shift for people. You're not stuck because of your circumstances. You're stuck because of the cognitive patterns your brain is running. Not your knowledge, not your potential, not your desire to change, but the underlying cognitive patterns, the automatic ways your mind interprets situations, the automatic ways it responds to pressure and tries to keep you safe. Because your brain is not designed to make you successful. Your brain is designed to protect you. And sometimes protection looks like hesitation. Sometimes protection looks like avoidance. Sometimes protection looks like staying exactly where you are, even when part of you wants more. So every time you step towards something new, something uncertain, something that's important and that matters, your brain runs a pattern. And that pattern might not be obvious. You might not hear it as a clear thought, but you feel it. You feel it as doubt. You feel it as tension. You feel it as stress, or you feel it as that subtle pull to slow down or to stop. In that moment, you don't experience it as a pattern. You experience it as, I don't feel like it, I'm not ready, I'll do it later. But what's actually happening is that something underneath awareness has already made the call. Your conscious mind is just catching up, trying to explain it, trying to justify it, trying to make sense of it. Once that happens, the opportunity passes. The action doesn't happen, and the cycle continues. So if you've been feeling stuck, if you've been frustrated with yourself, if you've been wondering why you can't seem to follow through, I want you to start looking at this differently. Not as a failure, not as a flaw, but as a pattern. Because once you start to see it as a pattern, once you label it, you stop fighting yourself. You start understanding what actually needs to change. That's where everything begins to shift. Once you start to recognize that this isn't about willpower, and it's not about discipline, the next question naturally becomes what actually is going on. Because if it's not you consciously choosing to stay stuck, then something else must be driving it. This is where we need to look a little deeper at how your mind is actually operating underneath the surface. Because most people think their behavior is being driven by decisions. They think, I decided not to do it. I chose to put it off. I just didn't follow through. But in reality, a lot of what you experience as a decision is actually the outcome of a pattern that's already run before you even became aware of it. Once you understand that, you stop taking it so personally. You stop labeling yourself as the problem. You start getting curious about what's actually happening. Let's just now break down a few of the key patterns that I work with. These patterns tend to show up when people feel stuck. First one is what I call an internal loop. This is where your attention gets pulled inward. You're thinking, into analysing, into replaying and imagining. At first that can feel useful. It can feel like you're preparing, like you're working things out, like you're getting ready. But the more you stay in that loop, the more it starts to create pressure. Because instead of moving forward, you're running scenarios. You're thinking about what could go wrong. You're replaying what has gone wrong. You're trying to predict outcomes before you've even taken action. And your body responds to that. Your system tightens. Your breathing shifts. Your sense of certainty drops. And suddenly, the thing you were going to do feels heavier than it did before. Not because it changed, but because your experience of it changed. So what do? You delay. You wait. You tell yourself, I just need to get my head right first. And what you're actually doing is staying inside the loop. And the longer you stay there, the harder it feels to step out. Another pattern that shows up is low tolerance for uncertainty. This one is huge, because almost everything that matters requires you to step into something unknown, a new direction, a new behaviour, a new decision. If your system doesn't handle uncertainty well, it will look for a way out, a way to avoid, not because it's trying to stop you, but because it's trying to protect you. So it starts asking questions like, what if this doesn't work? What if I get it wrong? What if this makes things worse? What if I look foolish? Again, you might not hear those questions clearly, but you feel the effect of them. You feel hesitation. You feel doubt. You feel that subtle pull to stay where things are predictable, even if they're not ideal. This is why people often stay in situations they know aren't right. Because familiar feels manageable, while uncertainty feels risky, even when the outcome could be better. And there's another pattern that quietly reinforces all of this. That's what we call global thinking. This is where the mind takes a moment and turns it into a meaning. You try something once, it doesn't go the way you hoped. Instead of seeing it as one experience, your mind turns it into a statement. This always happens. I never follow through. I can never seem to change. Once that statement forms, it starts to shape how you approach everything else. Because now you're not just acting in the present. Now you're carrying a story about who you are, a story about what you're capable of. That story becomes a filter. So even when you start something new, part of you is already expecting the same outcome. And that expectation then influences your behaviour. It changes how you show up. It changes how much you commit. It changes how long you stay with it. Before you know it, you've recreated the very thing you were trying to avoid. Not because it was inevitable, but because the cognitive pattern guided you there. And there's one more layer to this. It ties it all together. And that's the sense of control. Or more specifically, the loss of it. Because when these patterns run repeatedly, it starts to feel like this is just happening to me. I can't seem to change it. No matter what I do, I end up back here. That feeling is incredibly powerful because it shifts you out of influence and into reaction. Makes change feel distant, like something you want but can't quite reach. When that happens, motivation drops, effort drops, and the cycle continues. So when you put all of this together, the internal loops, the discomfort with uncertainty, the global thinking, the reduced sense of control, you don't just get hesitation. You get a system that is consistently pulling you back to what it knows, to what feels familiar, to what feels manageable. Even if it's not what you want, and even if it doesn't help you. This is why trying to fix this at the level of behavior doesn't work. Because behavior is the result. It's the output. If the patterns underneath stay the same, the output eventually returns to the same place. So if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right, but still ending up in the same position, it's not because you're missing something obvious. It's because you've been trying to change a result without changing what's producing it. Once that becomes clear, you stop chasing surface level fixes. You start looking at the level where change actually needs to happen. So once you start to see this clearly, once you understand that what you've been experiencing isn't a lack of effort or a lack of discipline, it's simply a pattern, everything begins to shift. Because you're no longer asking, what's wrong with me? You're asking, what pattern's running here? That's a completely different question. Because when you ask, what's wrong with me, you collapse inward. You judge, you criticize, you create pressure. When you ask, what pattern's running here, you step back, you observe, pause, you create space. That space is where change becomes possible, because now you're not fighting yourself, you're understanding yourself. This is where most people miss the real opportunity. They try to override the pattern, they try to push through the pattern. They try to force behavior to change while the underlying system stays the same. For a short time, that can look like progress. You can push yourself to act. You can create momentum. You can get results. But if the pattern underneath hasn't shifted, nothing holds. Because eventually, the system returns to what it knows. Returns to what feels familiar. That's why people experience that cycle of starting something strong, slowing down, stopping, and starting again. It's not because they lack ability. It's because they've been working at the wrong level. So the real shift is not about trying harder. It's about working differently. It's about moving from controlling behavior to influencing the system that creates the behavior. This is where something like cognitive pattern reprogramming becomes incredibly powerful. Because instead of focusing on what you should do, it focuses on how your mind is operating when you're doing it. Works with the part of your mind that associates meaning, predicts outcomes, responds to uncertainty, and drives your automatic reactions. Because that's where behavior is actually being generated. Not at the surface, but underneath. When you start to work at that level, you don't just change what you do, change how it feels to do it. It's a completely different experience, because the resistance that used to be there starts to soften. The hesitation that used to stop you starts to reduce. The internal pullback starts to lose its strength. Instead of forcing you forward, you find yourself moving with less effort, with more clarity, with a greater sense of calm and control. This is the point where people start to notice that something is genuinely different, not because they've become more disciplined, but because the system is no longer running the same patterns. So the things that used to trigger hesitation don't have the same effect. Situations that used to create doubt don't carry the same weight. The behaviours that used to feel difficult start to feel more natural, more accessible, more available. This is where real change begins. Not a dramatic overnight transformation, but in a steady shift in how you respond, how you think, how you move forward. Because once the pattern changes, the outcome follows. So if you've been feeling stuck, if you've been questioning yourself, if you've been wondering why you can't seem to follow through, I want you to take something very meaningful and very clear from this. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're not lacking something that other people have. You've simply been running patterns that was designed to keep things familiar, not to move you forward. Once you begin to change those patterns, everything else starts to realign. Your behavior, your decisions, your sense of control, your direction. Because you're no longer reacting automatically. You're responding intentionally. That's the difference. That's the shift. It's where things start to open up. Instead of asking yourself, why can't I just do it? Start asking, what's running when I don't? Because that question alone points you to the place where change actually happens. When you begin to work at that level, you're no longer stuck in the cycle. You're stepping out of it and moving forward with a system that supports you instead of holding you back. So that's it for today. I'll see you in the next episode, where we'll start to break down why your mind won't switch off and what you can actually do about it. Looking forward to seeing you then. Thank you.